All right, so welcome to Moms Inc. I have a few announcements for you, and then I'm going to have Christy introduce our wonderful speaker this morning. So the first thing I want to announce is we have 2 meetings in May, and so today, and then our next meeting will be on May 28th. And that will be our tea and testimony meeting. And so if you have not attended a tea and testimony meeting before, I just wanted to share a little bit about it with you. We joined together, and in typical form without COVID, we would be in the same room and we would get to share our testimony, whether it would be something Jesus did in our life throughout the year, in particular with Moms Inc. And this is one of the most favored meetings of the year. And so I would just encourage you guys to think of something that you are able to share. And we know that 10 o'clock time is a little bit of a challenge with little ones. So we decided to move it to 8 p.m. so that your littles can be asleep and you'll be able to participate in this meeting and share. And we will have some really great prizes. If you do share, you'll be entered into a raffle to win an Amazon gift card. So be thinking about what you want to share with us. And I'm excited to hear what the Lord has done in your guys' lives. Our second announcement is that we do have one more fundraiser, I think, coming up this, I'm not sure when, I forgot to write the date, but it's coming up. So make sure you check social media and your email for more information on that. The Pregnancy Help Center is still doing a virtual Walk for Life as a fundraiser for them. And we love them so much and all the work that they do there. And so we just wanted to encourage you guys, if you are able to participate in that or sponsor someone to go ahead with that. And that is this Saturday. So, and my last announcement is something that I've been repeating, but I just want to make sure everyone knows. So we did some interviews and posted them on our social media last week about some steering positions that are open. So if that is something that you're interested in, I would encourage you to listen to those. If you have any questions, to contact us. And and just apply for what you feel the Lord is leading you to do. So those positions will be open until May 28th. And at that time, our new coordinator, Dana, will be reviewing them with leadership and praying over who is to, so it won't be me that you're hearing from, but it will be some of our leadership that you get to hear from about those positions in the future. So, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. So what we do have open is we have DGLs that if you're interested in being a DGL, we have some mentor mom spots that are open. And then we have DGL coordinator, hospitality coordinator, and the service coordinator are all open. So, and without further ado, Christy, if you would like to introduce Susan, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, ladies. Hi, Susan. Good to see you.
Where's Susan?
I have
Susan, Mom?
She's right there, Mrs. Peterson. So I have the privilege of introducing Mrs. Peterson, Susan, to all of you ladies. So she's known me my entire life. She is the wife of my mom's boss, who is actually the one that led my mom to the Lord. So the Peterson family has a very special place in our hearts. And the 2 words that I think of when I think of Susan are faithful and fun. Faithful just in how she is just so devoted to the Lord. And in everything that she does, that's like the first and foremost thought of her heart and mind. She's been going with her family to Ecuador into the jungles, like legit the jungles, like they have to take a canoe to get there. and they've been doing mission work down there for
Who
like
are
what,
you
13
talking
years.
to, Mom?
Okay, go to grandpa. Okay. For like 13 years, and it's been incredible to just hear the stories and the ministry that has been going on there. And then fun, definitely. There's never a dull moment with this family. And one of the things that she's done is over the years of homeschooling her 3 boys, who are all now grown and our age, she put together this book called Fun Places. And it is just an incredible resource of like all the things you can do with your kids and adults in Southern California. And there's like all these tidbits and things that she put in there that's just like super helpful to know before you go. So yeah, she's just a wonderful, wise woman, and I'm so thankful that she is speaking to us today. So there you go. Go ahead.
Oh, no pressure. Thanks, Chrissy. I am excited, and when Chrissy had asked me and Susie had asked me, and I got to pick the women, you know, who to look into, and I thought, Martha, I love Martha. So today we get to look into her life, and we know about her and her sister Mary and their extra famous brother Lazarus, because they had a really tight relationship with Jesus. I mean, they were genuinely true friends. And in John 11:5, it says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And I'm not saying that Jesus is playing favorites, but it is mentioned that he loved Martha first. And I'm just saying I relate to Martha, who was one of Jesus's favorites. Again, just saying, not drawing any conclusions, but you know. And I thought, you know, what do we really know about Martha? Because Luke 10:38 says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened up her home to him. So I'm going to squeeze the screen a little bit if I can. There we go. And I thought, you know, would you invite Jesus into your house, into your home? Never minding all the dust bunnies or dust elephants and the toys and the dishes and the papers all scattered around. Or would you think about it and pause because maybe you'd plan to meet him somewhere else like Starbucks, which would actually be lovely to meet somebody at Starbucks right now, right? But you know, would you meet somebody there? Would you meet him there and pay for him? Because inviting somebody into your house is intimate, because it's your house and your decor and your stuff, unless you have a fake bookcase in the background, either way. But you know, but it reflects you, and people can judge you by your surroundings and by the surroundings that you've created. So it says Martha opened up her home to him. And then in John 12:1-2, it says 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead, hence him being really famous, and we'll get to that in a minute. So here a dinner was given in Jesus's home, and Martha served. So we know that in hosting Jesus, whenever she did it, Martha was also hosting his 11 closest friends and maybe even like an entourage. The phrase, like, she opened her home, sounds like it's such an easy breezy thing to do, like, hey, come on in, stay, whatever. But I think that we as women know it's so much more than that, because it's cleaning up the house first, right, before anyone comes over, and then it's cleaning it afterwards. It's making sure there are clean sheets on the beds, clean bath towels, clean showers, clean toilets. It's thinking about what you're going to serve for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner and for desserts and for snacks. It's going out to actually purchase the food, and then it's cooking it and then preparing it and then serving it. And it's being attentive to your guest needs and wants. It's setting a table, it's doing the dishes, repeat. It's also about creating a welcoming atmosphere so that people entering your home feel a sigh of relief at just being there, a place of unburdening for them. And it's a place for connection and community to happen. All of this and so much more. And I understand this intimately because our house has actually been a lovely rotation of long-term and short-term guests, whether they're family or friends, people we get introduced to that need a place to stay for a bit, and parties. Until he was 25, my youngest son, who's now 28, he had birthday parties at our house for 75 of his closest friends. And all of the kids were great, and they still pop in to say hi. For the most part, I really love having people over. And I know that one reason that God gave my husband and I this house was to offer it up to whoever needed a place to stay or just to hang. We remodeled it extensively in 2001, and our contractor slash architect was a Christian, and he gathered his crew together every morning in our house and prayed over our house, which I think is really cool. And he prayed over the people who would be gathering here. So I really consider our house to be God's house. Having said all that, it's also a lot of work to have people over, isn't it? There's so much to do, always, every time. The Greek word for hospitality is philoxenia, which translates to love as strangers. So in the time that the Bible was written, it was more common than it is today to invite a stranger into your home, because inns were scarce and travel by foot just took a long time. But just opening your home door, I think, is different than having or cultivating the gift of hospitality, because hospitality is inviting people into your home and making them feel welcome, as well as anticipating the needs of guests and strangers, and then joyfully providing for those needs. Martha had the gift of hospitality, and it's a specific gift that's mentioned in the Bible. 1 Peter 4:9 says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Romans 12:13 says, share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality. And Romans 12:6-7 says, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is serving, then serve. Sometimes it's not in the act of serving that things can get off track, but with the attitude of serving. The 1 Peter verse says to offer hospitality without grumbling. Oh, without grumbling, my mistake. Because sometimes I think we serve with righteous indignation or even a feeling of martyrdom. And I'm hoping that somebody else feels like that besides me. But Luke 10:39 says, Martha had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. And I have to address this because you can't study Martha without at least looking at her sister Mary, who, while Martha was bustling all around to try to make sure that everyone else was taken care of, Mary just sat at Jesus's feet. First of all, does anyone else have a sister? I'm just curious, because I have two. So sometimes like, okay, sisters kind of get it. And then she just sat. In verse 40, Jesus says, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And I think, really, is that how Luke is phrasing it, that she was distracted by all the preparations? She was probably working her butt off trying to get everything done and ready. And it's like when you have a party at 7 p.m., how do you feel when someone shows up at 6:30? I know for me, it's like, get out. I'm so not ready for you guys to be here. A few years ago, we had a 20-person birthday party for my husband's best friend, Susie Tim Personius. And I had cleaned the house and wrote out my list of what needed to be done. And side note, I really like lists. So sometimes I do things that aren't on my list, and then I go write it on my list and check it off just to make me feel like I've actually accomplished something that day. But that night, I had a really easy dinner menu, I thought, and it was going to be served buffet style. And I don't know exactly what happened, but I ended up in the kitchen the entire night, cooking and serving. And at the time, I was enjoying being in the serving mode because I wanted to make sure everyone was taken care of. I wanted the party to be a delightful event, and it was for everyone else. But I missed the party. I missed celebrating this friend's birthday. And afterwards, there's going to be a lot of confession time, just heads up on that in this whole thing. Afterwards, I allowed myself to get a little bit resentful because, number one, I ended up doing so much work. And number two, I didn't do it with a full-on joyful heart. And number three, I missed the party. I missed the opportunity to talk with the people that we don't often get a chance to see. I missed celebrating who the party was actually for. And I got distracted from the main focus, which isn't the food or the house, but a person. And I say that because I think very rarely is the real focus, the real thing. It's not about a thing, it's about a person. It's about loving people. On a practical note, I thought a lot about that event and what I could have done differently. And so what I've done differently since then, my options have included, number one, having all of the food prepared ahead of time. And number two, going simpler. And number three, having it catered. I've done all of those 3 since then. In verse 40, Luke goes on to say that Martha came to Jesus and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. And I remember that righteous indignation part and that martyrdom syndrome. Martha was ticked because she felt that what she was doing was more important than what Mary was doing. And I relate to this because I know that whatever I'm doing, whatever it is at any given moment, is more important than whatever somebody else is doing. I just know that. I do call that pride and self-centeredness. Martha has the audacity to bring her complaint directly to the Lord. And I thought, do we? Do we bring our complaints, our ugly hearts, our rawness directly to the Lord? Or do we try to hide how we really feel, even though nothing is hidden from the Holy Spirit? No thing that we feel, think, act, or do is hidden from the one who knows us intimately. I like Martha because instead of allowing bitterness to overtake her, she brings herself to Jesus. And yes, she dumps her not so beautiful feelings at his feet, but she comes to him, not away from him. And I really appreciate that. Then Martha demands of Jesus, tell her to help me. And I thought, Martha must have felt very comfortable with Jesus to say this. I would say that Martha pushed it a little bit because she did, she demanded, but at least she said it to Jesus and didn't try to hide how she felt. And whether the way we feel is right or wrong or appropriate to the situation or not, I think it's when we're being honest with God, when we're expressing our anger, our joys, our sorrows, our pains, that we're also open to really hearing what he says in response. That's a relationship, and we're invited to have that kind of intimate relationship with God. Has anyone ever watched the Brady Bunch? If you have, just raise your hands. You guys ever watched the Brady Bunch? Okay, so maybe you'll get this, I don't know, but inspired by Luke 10:41, I think about this Bible story and I think, Martha, Martha, Martha. I know it's Marcia, but because Jesus' response to her outburst is, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. So just stop here for a minute, because Jesus hears her complaints. He actually hears her heart. He lets her know that she's been heard by acknowledging how she's really feeling. And I thought, don't we want that? Someone please just acknowledge how I'm feeling. And sometimes that's enough. Jesus goes on to say in verse 42, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary, the good sister, has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. And I thought, that is such a gentle rebuke from Jesus. And it is both. It is gentle, and it's also a rebuke. Jesus didn't get angry or impatient with Martha, and he didn't look at her in disgust. He didn't tell her that what she was doing was unimportant either. But he also didn't agree with her or sympathize with her. He does what Jesus does in his grace. He calls her by name, calls us by name, probably to get our attention. But that also shows that he really knows us. He acknowledges what's truly in her heart. You are worried and upset about many things. Yes, yes. And then he gently but firmly refocuses Martha and us on the one thing, the only thing that's really important, and that's himself. There are so many good things to do in our everyday lives, isn't there? So many. And sometimes we feel overwhelmed with how many good things we could or should be doing. But there's only one best thing. A meal and housework are important, but they are only temporary. And I remember one time, probably more than one time, my husband came home from work and nothing was done. The house was a mess. No dinner was ready. And I'm pretty sure I looked a little frazzled. And he looked around at the house and the mess and the kids, and he wisely didn't make any comment to me except to ask me, how was your day? I looked at him, but I had probably glared at him. And I said, the kids are alive. And I thought, I did a good job today. That's it. So we as women are very aware how temporary a clean place is, because we can spend hours in cleaning the house and then people come over. And then we spend hours in making a meal, and then we eat it in a minute. And it's not to say that we shouldn't do those things, so I'm not giving any of us a pass, but time spent with Jesus is permanent because it transforms us for eternity. I think that we live in a Martha world, and we are esteemed and we're thought of as important and successful if we're always doing, if we're always busy. And then we alternately surrender and fight for those merry moments. The story directs us to just sit. And sometimes I think, man, just sitting sounds great. But just to sit at Jesus's feet and to listen to him, learning and becoming his disciple first. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And all these things, food, clothing, and all of our other worries and concerns of this life, all these things, Jesus will take care of. I think we need to readjust our priorities and seek him first. When we spend time with God first, when we spend time in God first, when we worship God before we work, we can then worship God in our work. And that changes how we work. It changes our attitude, it changes what gets done, and it changes who gets the focus and the glory. So being comes before doing. And I want to encourage you, mom, with young kids, because I know that part of what you're probably thinking is when, right? When do I have time to sit at Jesus's feet when my kids and my husband and the house and people and they all need me? And I don't know your exact schedule or how your day unfolds, so I can't tell you at 7:05 a.m., every morning spend time with Jesus. I'm not sure how I did it either with my boys. I homeschooled my kids. I had 3 wild boys, and I wrote a book and I had speaking engagements. So I don't know. I know that there are days when I snuck off to the bathroom just to have a few minutes of alone time before my kids found me and started pounding at the door. Although I will say it was worse when there's utter silence, isn't it, on the other side? And I know that there's times when I got up early or stayed up late because I was absolutely desperate for Jesus. I know that my husband is a huge support for me in shared kid duty, and I know that not everyone has that situation. I wasn't legalistic about having a daily quiet time every single day because legalism steals joy. But I also know that days without sitting at Jesus's feet, for however long I got to sit there, that drains joy too. Maybe part of your day could look like turning worship music on and worshiping with the kids. Maybe it's praying together with them. Maybe it's saying no to something. Maybe it's saying yes to something else. What I know is that I need Jesus, and I need him every day, then, now, and always. And as he becomes or is the focus, and as we cry out to him, somehow he arranges time to be with him because it's vital, it's life-giving. So I encourage you, pray, ask, seek. He will supply the time that you need to be with him. One more story about Martha. Her brother Lazarus died. Not like, oh, he doesn't feel good and looks dead type of thing, but he was legitimately dead, and he was in the tomb for 4 days before Jesus arrived at their home to visit with them. So, and if you don't know the whole story, which I'm not completely covering here, read it in the Gospel of John, chapter 11. But we pick up the story in John 11, verses 20 through 21, which says, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So in her devastating grief, Martha went out to greet Jesus, not necessarily with open arms, it doesn't sound like, but kind of with a rebuke. Where were you, Jesus? Again, I love her openness and honesty with him. And I love her trust in Jesus. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Why not? Why wouldn't he have died? I don't know. I don't know if she knew, but she trusted that Jesus could have done something to prevent Lazarus' death. She trusted in who Jesus was. Martha follows that up with another astounding statement in verse 22. And she says, I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Even now, she said, even though Lazarus is dead and he's been in the tomb for 4 days, what did she expect Jesus to do? Have you ever thought about that? What did she expect him to do? She expected him to ask God to do something. Again, she had to have trusted in who Jesus said that he was. And I thought, do we trust Jesus like that? That he can do something, anything, even in the circumstances that don't look like anything at all is possible to be hoped for. I had a life-changing experience 12 years ago on one of our missions trips to Ecuador. Chrissy had mentioned that, and we've gone into the jungle. But this trip, it was really powerful. It was through a series of dire circumstances, and it started with our arriving in Ecuador. And then my family, just my family, not the rest of the team, was immediately escorted by armed guards back up to be put on the next plane home out of Ecuador before we could even enter the country. And it was a supposed passport snafu, but that wasn't true. That wasn't the case. I think Satan was the real cause of all of this. It was a horrible, horrible time. We did get to stay in the country at the very last minute. Series of events, so much more to get into, but it culminated on what was to be a 6-hour hike into the jungle that turned out to be a 2-day trek. And I fondly refer to it as the hike of death. But it radically changed my life forever. All those years of being a Christian since I was 16 years old, so that's a long time, I realized I never trusted God completely until that moment. And I didn't know that I hadn't. But it was there in the midst of that excruciating situation that I completely and fully trusted God from that day forward. God is trustworthy. Martha knew that. And let Jesus know that she knew that. And I don't know if she knew what he could do or would do, but she knew that he could do something. So in verse 25 to 27, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, Martha replied. That's amazing. That is amazing. She knew all about Jesus from all the people that came by her place because she was a great hostess. She'd heard all the stories about him. And more than that, she personally knew Jesus. She knew his laughter and his joy, his appreciation, how people he traveled with respected him. And she knew the authority of his teaching. Yet all of these things that Jesus was stating and asking her about himself, they were powerful. They were life and death. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, Martha replied. And all of this is taking place outside of her brother's grave, where he's dead, before Jesus resurrected him. And I don't think she knew what Jesus was about to do, because right before this, Jesus asked her, he said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus asked her, do you believe this? Yes, Lord, Martha replied. This is trust, this is faith, and this is hope. Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Romans 15:13 says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with the hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Without knowing the book of Romans, this is how Martha responded to God in the midst of such great personal heartache for her. She's a great example, I think. And Martha goes on to firmly say to Jesus, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. She believed exactly who Jesus said he was. And from there on out, her faith never wavered. I will say in verse 39 through 40, when Jesus said, take away the stone that was in front of Lazarus' tomb, Martha, being ever the good hostess, got very practical. But Lord, said Martha, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days. So I love that practical side of her. The ending of the story is that Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. He was alive. Christy said that this year you've been studying different women from the Bible, even how in their imperfections, they are loved by God and used by him for his glory in powerful ways. And I think Martha fits that bill to a T. Her imperfections are glaringly obvious. In fact, they used to leap out at me so much more readily than her good characteristics. So what a pleasure it's been to re-dig into her life, who she is, for a better, more correct perspective. She's a hard worker, but sometimes she comes across as kind of a whiner, as someone who's put out. Some people are good at being the behind the scenes people. I don't think Martha was, because she wants credit for what she's doing, and she makes that obvious. Look at what I'm doing, Lord, all by myself. This is what I'm doing. And I'll be honest with you one last time, but I wish I was a person who enjoyed the behind the scenes. But I like it when people give me credit or say thank you. And hear me when I say that saying thank you or hearing it from someone is not a bad thing at all. It's just when sometimes we desire that too much, or maybe that's even a motivation for doing something, that it flips to being a negative. Martha also kind of throws her sister under the bus. Mary's just sitting around. And Martha is bossy, even to Jesus. Tell her to help me. I'm not sure we should get bossy with Jesus. But then again, I think I do that quite a bit when I tell him what I want, or what I will and will not do, or how he should run things. So Martha sometimes gets a bad rap, while Mary, the sister, is pointed out as the virtuous one, the one to emulate. And yes, Mary is absolutely to be emulated. What she's doing is sitting at Jesus's feet and learning from him. But so is Martha. She is absolutely to be emulated. She's a hostess with a big heart who wants to serve those who come for a visit and to stay. I think she's humble because I think she served them with an embrace and a warm welcome, a home with a lovely welcoming ambiance, and serves them with delicious food that makes any traveler feel welcome. She must, because Jesus kept coming back, didn't he? Martha might not have held back her complaints, but she also didn't hold back in proclaiming who Jesus was, Messiah, Son of God, in front of all the witnesses who were there to share in the mourning of her brother's death. She was bold and passionate, and Martha trusted Jesus even with the impossible. She didn't know what he would do, but she trusted that he would. I think there's so much to emulate about her. And Jesus loved her. She was a favorite. And I'm just saying, maybe we're Jesus's favorite too. So that's what I have to share with you guys this morning. So I'm hoping that you got something and enjoyed it, because I loved it. I loved resetting Martha. So thank you for asking me to do that and asking me to speak today too. You guys are back on.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was amazing. I loved hearing your stories. And yeah, I definitely relate to a lot of what you had shared. Thank you.
You bet.
Miriam, we have some raffles for those that signed on to our live Zoom. So Miriam, if you want to give those prizes away, or prize.
Yeah, we have one raffle today. We have a Starbucks gift card. Things are opening up, so you'll be able to get a cup of coffee. And the winner is she still on? Heidi. She was on earlier. Heidi, yeah.
She was trying to join back in. I think she got kicked off. It just says joining still. I don't know what happened. So.
Oh, okay.
But we can let her know. Okay, cool.
Thank you for speaking.
Thank you so much, you guys. And this